So I saw a stat line the other day from Dalen Terry in a game for the Windy City Bulls in which he went 1 for 3 in 9 minutes of play for the G League Bulls, finishing with just 2 points, while the Bulls' two-way players, undrafted players mind you, in Batim and Damasinogo, had 14 points each in said game. And while this isn't going to be a video about Dalen Terry and how disappointing he's been as a first-round draft selection that has barely played any meaningful minutes for the Bulls since entering the league, and sure, you can talk about whether he's getting the proper development, would things be different if the Bulls weren't a team full of veterans looking to win now, but whatever you want to chalk it up to, I think most people, if they could go back, they probably would have preferred the Bulls to take someone else at 18 in the 2022 draft. And thinking about this, it made me realize I haven't done one of these retrospective what if type videos in a while. And so in today's video, we're going to be looking back at all of the Bulls draft picks made by the new regime of AK and Mark Eversley and redrafting those selections and see how the Bulls roster would stack up with the newly redrafted players. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Of course, if you are coming onto the channel for the first time, welcome, glad to have you here. And if you like the content, be sure to subscribe to help the channel grow, and we can all lament about just how bad this Bulls team has found themselves in, partially because of the lack of draft selections, but also because of poor trade decisions and free agency acquisitions. Now, I know some are probably wanting to see me do a redraft going a little bit further back, perhaps since the Jimmy Butler trade in which the Bulls took Lauri Markkanen 7th overall in the 2017 draft. But a while back, I think it was a few years ago now, at least 2 years now, I actually did a video on redrafting the Bulls' 3 consecutive number 7 picks in which they took Markkanen, Wendell Carter Jr., and Coby White, respectively. Check it out if you're interested. It's an older video, so some of the info is probably a little dated. I'll probably do an updated redraft for those picks at some point, especially now that most of the players from those draft classes have entered their primes and we have a good idea of what kind of players they are now. But anyway, like I said, for the purposes of this video, we're going to be redrafting the post GarPax draft picks, and keep in mind I'm only redrafting what we know were in fact the picks that were actually made. Yes, I'm fully aware that if the Bulls took, spoiler alert, Tyrese Halliburton 4th overall instead of Patrick Williams, that likely changes the entire trajectory and direction for which they go in, which means maybe they don't even make a trade for Vucevic, which would mean maybe they keep their 2 first-round picks that they traded to Orlando. And maybe they don't even go after Lonzo Ball in free agency of 2021 because they would already have Halliburton. So yes, I get it. One pick changes everything from that point on going forward, but just go with me on this. So of course, the first draft pick under the management and leadership of AK with the 4th overall selection, the Bulls took Patrick Williams, and it's probably no surprise to anyone that in this redraft, we're going to be taking Tyrese Halliburton instead. As most of you know, I'm still a Pat believer and think he can be a great player in this league if he can just get over the mental hurdles and confidence issues that he faces, but at the end of the day, we all know he's not a future star. He's likely not going to be anything more than a high-level two-way role player. And I'm sure most will agree that when you see a player like Tyrese Halliburton and what he has displayed in his young career thus far, this dude is a stud. And honestly, is pretty much exactly what the Bulls need at this point in time. An elite-level passer and playmaker who can score, get to the line, and shoot it from deep at a high rate. Tyrese Halliburton is Lonzo Ball with elite-level offense, but probably minus the defense. Now, I know a lot of Bulls fans have been saying, I cannot believe the Bulls did not take Halliburton there with the 4th pick, or even Devin Vassell for that matter, who went 11th in that draft. But first of all, this was a pretty weak draft class. And really, when you look at the guys who were taken right after Pat, Okoro, Okongwu, Killian Hayes, Obi Toppin, Denny Avdia, Jalen Smith, like none of these guys, so far anyway, have been anything special. So there were a lot of teams that missed out on Halliburton, who was taken 12th overall, not just the Bulls. And so yes, hindsight is 2020. Obviously, Halliburton would either go 1 or 2 in a redraft, but just saying that Patrick Williams has been a disappointment for a lot of fans because of where he was selected, a lot of guys that were taken right after him, even the guy who was taken 2nd in James Wiseman, haven't really amounted to much either. Now, here's the thing. The Bulls taking Halliburton would have completely shifted everything for this team. Then, maybe they don't hold on to Coby White and look to trade him. Who knows? Maybe they see that Halliburton is the future and they decide to build around him instead of Zach Lavine and look to move Zach before he became a free agent. But regardless, Halliburton would have been an incredible fit on this team, especially since at that time the Bulls were in desperate need of a point guard, and of course that still remains true today given what happened to Lonzo Ball. Now, the 2nd round pick Second round picks are always hard to redraft because quality players are so few and far between, but given the Bulls took Marko Simonovic 44th overall, a guy who never played a single minute of non-garbage time basketball for the Bulls, yeah, we're going to take someone else. And instead, we're going to take KJ Martin, who hasn't been anything spectacular, but for a late second round pick who has actually been able to play and compete in NBA level basketball and has actually been an okay scorer, a good wing player, yeah, that would have been better than taking someone like Marko Simonovic. Now, going into the 2021 draft, obviously the Bulls did not have their first round pick as that was traded to the Magic for the Vucevic deal. So instead, the only pick the Bulls had in that draft was Ayo Dosunmu, who they took 38th overall. And while yes, I know Ayo, ever since his rookie season in which he was named second team all defense, he's been on a downward slump, didn't have the best sophomore season, obviously hasn't been able to get a lot of minutes so far this year. But again, the Bulls are trying to win now. But even despite all of that, there really isn't anyone that was taken after Ayo that I would have preferred. So instead of drafting someone else, I would have the Bulls keep Ayo here, even though the fit might not be the best considering the Bulls would now have Halliburton in this instance, but you still draft the best player available, and then if the Bulls needed to move on from him, they could. But then in 2022, this is the draft that the Bulls really needed to hit on, knowing they already forked over their lottery pick in 2021 and also knowing they didn't have their pick in 2023, which would eventually end up being the 11th pick that would go to the Magic. And then even though the Bulls were coming off of a season in which they had finally gotten back to the playoffs, they had that incredible run to start the year and then just fell off after that, getting beaten down badly in the playoffs, it was still important that they hit on this pick knowing the limited draft capital they had. And with the 18th pick, they took Dalen Terry. And I'll be honest, when they made that selection, I was like, who? Because he wasn't really on my draft board, not on my radar. Granted, I also said the same thing when the Bulls took Patrick Williams. And to me, what was most shocking, and I mentioned this recently after the Bulls beat the Utah Jazz, I could not believe the Bulls did not take Walker Kessler with this pick. Kessler was slated to go around this time in the draft. He eventually was taken 22nd by the Wolves before he was included in the Rudy Gobert trade. And for the Bulls team, a team that at that time, and this really still remains the case, but one of the biggest things that was talked about going into the offseason was the need for the Bulls to add size, a backup center, and rim protection. Walker Kessler fit the bill for all of that. Mind you, this was before the Bulls signed on Drake Drummond, so literally their backup center was Tony Bradley, who was often so bad the Bulls had to play Derrick Jones Jr. at the 5. Walker Kessler going into that draft was known as one of the greatest shot blockers in college basketball that they had seen in decades. Dude was an animal when it came to protecting the rim, crashing the offensive boards, and finishing around the paint. The Bulls needed that so badly, and ever since then, when Kessler entered the league, he's exceeded expectations relative to where he was drafted, being one of the best shot blockers and offensive rebounders in the league, not just among his rookie class, but in the league. He finished second in Rookie of the Year voting and was named first team All-Rookie for a 22nd draft pick. But the Bulls decided to take Dalen Terry instead because they preferred getting the best talent rather than prioritizing positional need, even though they also missed on the talent piece since Terry still can't even dominate in the G League. But Walker Kessler on this team to go along with Tyrese Halliburton. I mean, if you keep all things equal, even with Zach, DeMar, and Vucevic still remaining on the team, this is a legitimate team when you have an up-and-coming superstar in Tyrese Halliburton that actually would give the Bulls the floor general and playmaker they need, as well as a guard who can space the floor. Although, might get a little tricky fit-wise considering Halliburton is also a very ball-dominant guard like Zach Lavine, DeMar DeRozan. But I'd like to think it would work out. And then you also have a big that actually can protect the rim. Even though he's coming off the bench, it's not something the Bulls have now, which is why they're one of the worst shot blocking and rebounding teams in the NBA. That would do wonders for this roster. Does it make them a title contending team in the immediate term? Probably not, but I would have a lot more confidence in the future of this team knowing they could build around a player like Tyrese Halliburton. Man, what could have been, what could have been. I'm not going to do this year's draft where the Bulls traded into the draft to get Julian Phillips just because it's way too soon to do a redraft for this class, and Phillips hasn't played any meaningful minutes thus far anyway. We'll have to wait a couple years for that one to really suss that out. But anyway, let me know what you guys think of these few redraft selections. I know it isn't that many, mainly because the Bulls haven't had a lot of draft picks since AK took over, but let me know if you would have drafted differently. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.